So if you're struggling to differentiate yourself from all of the other apartments out there, basically what it's going to come down to for renters is how you say things. And that comes down to your content, and that's going to be your superpower when you're trying to get attention and also be different. So we're Market Apartments. I'm Danny, I'm a social media specialist, and this is Chandra.
Yep, I'm the content writer. And that's what we're covering today is content. If you've been following along with our kind of little mini series we're doing on web-based writing, basically, you're kind of like writing for marketing as a property manager or apartment marketer. We did a video that was a quick overview of copy and content, some of the differences there, and how to approach them. And then we've already done a video on copywriting specifically. So today's video is going to be on content, which we both do some of. I usually do long form and Danny does a lot of short form content. But that's kind of what we're going to talk a little bit about today and offer some of our like best tips for making your content effective, getting renters' attention, and helping it get you leads and leases. Even though the goal of content is to inform, educate. We talked a little bit about that. It kind of works hand in hand with copy and getting people to actually take the next step in signing on with you. So we wanted to just cover what we could and see if we can give you guys a little bit of help in getting started. We know that writing for the web, writing for your apartments can be a lot and it can be kind of overwhelming. So we wanted to break it down a bit, and content is really fun because it's so broad. There's so many things you can cover. Longer form content means, you get to add images, go more in depth. There are a lot of perks to that. So basically get ready to take your content and your content marketing to the next level with some of our best tips today. The first thing we wanted to briefly mention, we have mentioned in both of the other videos, is just that you want it to be focused on your audience. So you want everything you write to be renter focused. So considering their needs, their pain points, the things that they're looking for. We won't dive too deep into that because we have already covered that a couple of times, but it is the number one thing to keep in mind. Just like the number one thing when coming up with any sort of marketing strategy or plan is to consider your audience. When you're writing for them, that's the number one thing to think about too. So make sure that you're thinking about what they're interested in, what's actually going to add value to their lives. And then, just approach it in a way that is empathetic, friendly, thoughtful, and that shows that you really understand who they are and what they need. So just again, as a base level, always keep that in mind. No matter what you're writing online, your audience is kind of the number one thing to consider.
For sure, absolutely. You want to connect with them. We've said it before, we'll say it again.
Yeah, for sure.
Okay, so like with headlines and titles, your main focus is to get attention and kind of like provide a glimpse of like the value that you're going to provide for the renters with your content, essentially. So you want to introduce the subject in a way that makes them want to read more. So it's kind of like a hook, and we talked a lot about hooks in the copy video, if you saw that. But basically you just want to get attention in a fun way and just show them what they're going to get out of your content. So a couple examples, like 3 tips to make a small room feel larger, or space saving tips for tiny apartments, or 3 ways to lower your energy bill for the summer. But like, it's going to provide value for them, but it's also like, it's interesting. It's interesting for them specifically. So
yeah, they're real issues that renters have.
yes.
A lot of times if you're renting an apartment, you are looking for ways to save money. And then on top of that, if you are living in a small space, it can be, it can be difficult. We just downsized, our apartment to move location. And if you've been following along on our videos, I have mentioned that we did a little chat about my like apartment hunting process, but it is difficult downsizing and figuring that out. So like it shows, if you're writing something like that, it shows that you're aware of renters and common issues they have, common problems, things they need, things they're trying to resolve in their own lives. It's adding value to their lives by giving them some things that are going to make their lives better as they live in your apartment. And if you're the one to offer that, that builds a lot of trust with you. They're much more likely to choose you over other places if you're the one adding that value.
For
So
sure.
yeah, I think that's really important. And yeah, you just want to make sure that when you're writing, that the thing you're writing does kind of grab their attention, that it's
Mhm.
something they want. Don't let your titles and headlines be too muddy. Don't use like jargon they're not going to understand. Just make sure it's really clear, it's kind of catchy, and that it's going to provide some sort of information, some sort of solution, or it's really entertaining for whoever might read it. And then beyond that, you're going to jump into the body, and that's just going to have to support whatever you're kind of saying you're going to address.
For sure. Yeah. So like the body, depending on what kind of thing you're writing, it could be a blog post. It could just be like a paragraph on your website.
Mhm.
Like you go to the website, here's the headline. This is like the website, like homepage. And then it's just like, here's a little paragraph, a little bit about us, but it's like, but that is content too. So, or like social media posts too. Like some of them are they're meant to educate or entertain and not necessarily to persuade to take an
Mhm.
action. But it's
Mhm.
like you want to you want to be entertaining and you want to make sure that you're educating and you want to make sure that it's really concise too because you want to tell them what they need to know essentially and you want to leave out the fluff. So
Mhm.
make sure that it flows really well too. Chandra's really good at making things flow, like really good at it. I'm actually really jealous. But but yeah, you want to make sure that it flows like we were talking about before, where it's like you kind of pretend that you're having a conversation with renters. So you're trying to get inside their head and like, what thoughts are they going to have next? Let's answer those objections that they might have.
Mhm.
So you want to make sure that it flows in that way so that it's easier for them to read so that like they can follow along really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, exactly. You just want to make sure that it like logically makes sense. So, I
Yes.
mean, a lot of times if you're structuring, say, a blog post, but even something shorter, yeah, you've got your headline or your title or whatever, something that's going to grab their attention, but it always needs to be tied into whatever that like conclusion is, whatever you are actually
Yep.
telling them. And then the body you're going to break down so that it answers all of those questions in a way that makes sense. We've all written essays, you know, in high
Yeah.
school or something. It's really not that different. It's just that, you know, this isn't going to be as formal. It's going to be a lot more conversational. You're
Yep.
going to use
Yep.
things that actually really connect with them, because you're not presenting some sort of research paper. Like even if you're educating, even if you're just trying to like inform them about something, it's for their benefit, you know, it's more of like teaching than it is like presenting some like big, you know, researched whatever thing. So like keep in
Yeah.
mind your tone and how you want to reach those people and what is actually going to make a difference. And what's going to keep them reading, you know.
For sure.
Um, that's why you want it to, yes, have a good flow, but you also want to be concise. Like you mentioned, don't add a lot of fluff. You're going to take out anything that's not actually kind of helping you
Yes.
reach them, and then use things that help you connect with people, like stories,
Hmm.
testimonials, different examples of whatever it is you're trying to show. I mean, if you're talking about ways to make your small room feel larger, make sure you've got specific examples that you can show for each of those things. So like, just make sure that each point you make has some sort of supporting example because you're trying to illustrate it for them in the easiest way possible, I would say.
For sure. Yeah. Actually, I saw a post from I think it was apartments.com just the other day. And
Mhm.
it's a social media post and it's kind of like an how-to, but and it was a video. But I think it kind of applies here too, where it's
Mhm.
like they were saying this is what you should do, and then they did like the before and after, and it made a huge difference. Like adding mirrors, that makes the room feel larger too, because it like
Mhm.
extends the space,
Right.
or and they showed that. Or like more of the natural light where you're like opening the curtains, like it did bring in more of like it does make it feel larger, but doing the before and after can be really huge for that too. So I just wanted to
Absolutely.
mention that.
Yeah, no, but that's why it's important to add images, you know, images or
Yeah.
graphics can really help. You really don't want to, like, you don't want to overpower your content,
Right.
but the images help break up like long sections of text. They also help illustrate what you're trying to say
Yeah.
in a way that maybe words alone can't do,
Hmm.
especially for things like that, that are visual things.
Hmm.
You know, it's different if you're talking about something completely different and that you can explain better in text. But I think most of us benefit from having some sort of visual to go along with it. It helps us process it. So, I mean, if you're
For sure.
telling it, especially if you've got some great story to go with it, that's already going to be really like attention grabbing because someone's going to want to follow along with that story. If you've got images that help illustrate it, they're going to really remember it. It's going to make the content memorable, which honestly, that's what you want. You want to build trust with your prospects and with your current renters. You want to be seen as like reliable. You want to provide good information, show you have authority, and all of that helps you do that.
For sure. Yeah.
You know, the clearer you are, the better.
Yes, absolutely.
Mhm. Yeah. And I would say too, then all of that really should lead pretty easily into your conclusion where, you know, generally you're going to reiterate kind of, you know, your main points, tie things together. I mean, think about the framing. Like you said, you're going to offer this. Did you do,
Yes.
you know?
Yeah.
Or you started in this place, you ended up somewhere else. What was it and why, and how does it tie back to the beginning? You know,
Yeah.
all of this stuff in the middle just bolsters that main idea. And so, just make sure, yeah, that you kind of like reiterate it. You make sure it's clear. You make sure that you help them understand the point of what you were writing. And then, yeah, just sign off, let them know how they can reach you if they need to, you know, keep it pretty clean. Conclusion doesn't have to be that long, you know, it doesn't, you do need one though. Don't just like, here's the body, here are all the points, and then you're just gone. Like, don't leave them hanging.
Yes.
Write a conclusion. And then, you know, that's a good point too, where you can throw in your call to action, which might technically be copy, but we are putting it on most blog posts anyway. So make sure you let them know like what to do next. Is that subscribe so they can read more of your blogs? Is it contact you to like schedule a tour because you were talking about the different effect of like floor plans or something? Like think about what the goal of the article is and what call to action would actually tie in with that, I guess.
Yes. Oh yeah, for sure. Because like if it's a blog about like you're trying to help renters and you have like these apartment tips, they might want to know more about that. And they might want to know when your next blog comes out. And that would
Mhm.
be really helpful. So yeah, if you can get them on the email list and be like, hey, we just came out with this post about like how to organize your tiny apartment to make it feel
Yeah.
like you have more room. Like they might be interested in that. So yeah, you do want to make sure that you have the call to action and you can stay in touch with them too. And that's really helpful.
Mhm. Yeah, for sure. I know it might be a little bit different on like shorter form content, but a lot of times the structure is really similar, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, the structure it's pretty similar. So like with the social media posts, we have our hook or the headline, and then we get into a little bit of the like you're kind of limited on Instagram because they
Mhm.
only let you have so many characters or so many words, you know. And you can actually do a lot more on Facebook, but yeah. If you're cross posting though, you want to keep that in mind where like Instagram is a little bit more limited. So you can add the body stuff, but you do want to hit like the main points. And if you can add stories in there or testimonials or examples, like that really helps, like you said, to illustrate your point and to like provide imagery because that's
Mhm.
what people remember, like we mentioned. So yeah, it is a little bit, you have to be shorter in the body for sure. But yeah, you still have your call to action. You still have your little conclusion. You can have just like one line where it's like,
Yeah.
how did they use the structure? It was like in school they would tell you the beginning is like this is what I'm going to talk about, and then the body is like this is what I'm talking about, and then the end is like this is what I talked about. So you kind
Yeah.
of still want to have that structure overall, but it's just
Mhm.
shorter.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And I mean, you can include some of the text on the post itself, like in the images.
Yeah, yeah,
If, especially if it's something like you're providing education, you know, you can create infographics, you can do things like that where you can include some text as well. So I would just like keep that in mind, like where you can put that, make sure they're getting the information. Or, you know, maybe the social media post is just a shorter version of the
yeah.
blog. And so then you can
Mm-hmm.
give them a link in your bio or right within
Yeah,
it if it's on Facebook, so that they can go back to it. I mean, think about how you're going to share it too, because that's important. But
for
a
sure.
lot of the content that you write is going to be useful across platforms. You just have to
Yeah,
find the way to format it. So whether that's you shorten it, you summarize it, or you expound on something that you've mentioned in social media. Maybe you had a
yeah,
post that did really well and you're like, oh, I really should cover this, write a blog about it.
yeah.
Um, and then share that via email to your renters so that they know that that information is there. Or even write something up just for your newsletter. You know, maybe you don't have
Mhm.
a blog yet, but there are ways to provide renters with a lot of good information. And I don't know, lean into as many ways as you can, I would say.
Oh, for sure. I like that you mentioned the repurposing content too, because that's
Mhm.
huge and not a lot of people know that they
Right,
can or
right,
that it's an option. But yeah,
right.
like we're doing the video right now for YouTube, but I'm gonna take it and I'm gonna break it down into little
Mhm.
reels that I'm gonna share on social media. And then like if you have blog posts, you can take those and repurpose those, take little bits of them, and you can make multiple social media posts out of them, or
Yeah.
you can do like a series. But yeah, I like that you mentioned that because yeah, that's huge.
Yeah. So, I mean, a lot of things, you know, sometimes I think we have a hard time coming up with topics or coming up, but
Yeah.
if you've already got an amazing like post, why not? Like that topic's still going to be relevant on other platforms if you've got people following you. So I think it's just important to lean into that. On top of that, so say, okay, you've got a basic kind of content structure, or at least a jumping off point. There are a lot of ways to approach content. You could probably be on the internet for hours Googling different like tips about content writing.
Mm-hmm.
Um, because there are so many places that it is now. Um, but you really want to make sure, especially if it's content for like your website, like on a blog or even your web pages, though a lot of your web pages might lean a bit more copy than others, you know. You are trying to kind of sell yourself on your website. So a lot of your web pages have certain goals on each page, you know, you want to
Yeah.
get people to do stuff. So it's probably going to be a bit more persuasive. So you know, take this with, I guess, a grain of salt. It just depends on your approach on each page. But especially if you've got a blog, uh, you really want to lean into SEO, so search engine optimization, and using keywords to make sure that search engines can like find you, rank you, you know, so that they see what your content is about. They see who it can help. They know where to kind of put you when people have a certain search intent. So if someone's Googling something, they want to make sure that they can find the pieces that are actually going to match whatever someone is looking for. So that's why keywords are so important. And not only do you need to have keywords throughout like the body of the text, but you want to make sure that you've got your H1 and H2 tags and meta descriptions. We don't really have time to dive too much into SEO here, but those are kind of the big ones. So basically any headings, subheadings, your meta tag is, you know, what Google's going to use kind of like to describe the little thing, and it tells Google exactly what it's about. So all of those are really important to keep in mind. That also applies for short form content. I mean, I think even Instagram now is looking at keywords more than it used to.
Yeah,
So,
for sure. They're starting to
um,
replace they're starting to replace the hashtags with the SEO optimization. So
yeah. And things like if you're posting on Pinterest,
yeah,
that works hand in hand with Google a lot. So that's another place where that is important. So no matter where your copy is, you want to make sure that the keywords that are relevant to what you're talking about are there. So if you're just talking about, you know, your apartments or apartment living in your city, make sure that you're saying the city and state, make sure that that's where you're being found. You know, if you're talking about specifically apartment living tips, some sort of tip, make sure that you cover that. If it's, again, like we mentioned about like making small spaces feel bigger, do a little bit of keyword research, see what you can include. Again, like that's a little bit beyond the scope of the video, but it is something I want anyone watching this to be aware of, that with content, SEO and keywords are a huge part of that. It's a separate skill set. You know, I know even
yes,
some places they'll have somebody who writes the content and then someone that goes in and kind of like adds in keywords, or someone who has given them keywords to make sure they include, like, it's not always the same person who's doing all of the research, but it is important.
for sure,
So, mhm,
for sure. Because especially that topic that the how to make a smaller room feel larger, that can be a competitive topic. You
mhm,
can find tons of blog posts around it. So if you want to rank higher, you're going to need the keyword research. You're going to need to be able to rank higher, like using
mhm.
SEO.
Right. Well, and showing that you have authority. So anything
Right.
that, I guess it comes back to like being like human and authentic is part of
Yes.
showing you have authority, like personalization. So like if you say, oh, well, in my experience or in working with renters over my time, you know, over my 10 years or whatever as a property manager, like anything that shows that within the content also shows you have authority. So that can be really, really helpful. Um, Google wants to see that. They want to know you have the expertise because that's what it's prioritizing. It's prioritizing someone who is an expert in the thing, who has the authority to actually talk about it, because, you know, it knows that that's what people are looking for. No one goes on the internet to just go, what's Joe, you know, whoever, like just someone writing about this. No, they're going because they want someone who knows what they're talking about to give them advice, to give them information. And so Google knows that, so Google's prioritizing that. So if you have that expertise, if you have that experience, mention it. Another way to do that is through like interlinking, because that builds site authority. So that's a bit more on the technical side. That's going to be less about like what you're writing. But it is part of that process, in that usually where you're linking. So say you've got a blog post, like we've talked about making an apartment feel bigger. Well, if you mention in that some other like tip or something that's related to another blog post you've had, or you mention that it can really vary depending on your floor plan, and you link to your floor plan page or things like that, you're creating a link on a specific keyword. So if the keyword was apartment floor plans, you know, especially in your city or something, like apartment floor plans in Salt Lake City, like where we are, like if that is your keyword and you've created a link there that hyperlinks back to your floor plan page, you just made that floor plan page have more authority. You're saying this was a valuable thing to link to. And so, I mean, that's very basic. And there's a lot more to it than that, but I'm sorry if I'm overwhelming anyone watching this video. You don't have to know all of this to write good content. It's just helpful if you've gotten a start, you've got content on your site, but you want to make it better. You want to try to improve your ranking because you're just not reaching the people like you want to. And I just want to give you the tools that help you at least know what to Google, at least know what to search, so that you can kind of go, oh, well, I know she said this. Let me see what else I can find out. Or, you know, if you don't want to do it on your own, that's what people like us are for. We literally market for apartments. We do this all the time. So just a little bit of extra info there that might have been a little too in depth, but hopefully give you a little bit of insight on how to make your content more impactful from like a technical side. Anyway.
Sure. Yeah, we could do entire videos on that too, so.
Oh, hundreds of them. It is
Yeah,
a vast, vast subject.
for sure. So another thing, like with the personalization now and like talking to people, is like you want to talk as a human, and you don't really want to, like we've talked about this before, but you don't really want to rely on AI to write everything for you.
Mhm.
Like it's good for researching, but it kind of does sound robotic and boring and formulaic, especially
Yeah.
because like if you're talking to them, and like you also want to keep in mind about like where they are in their journey of getting to know
Mhm.
you, like where they are
Exactly.
in the process. But like if they keep seeing this same type of formulaic like
Mhm.
content, that gets boring really quickly. So you want to
Mhm.
make sure that you are talking to them where they are, but also like as a human, where it's like if they don't know you yet, it's like you talk to them a specific way, like it's very inviting, it's very personable, it's approachable, it's like
Mhm.
this is what we have, and if you want to learn more, here's where you go. And then
Right.
over here where it's like a blog post, it's like, hey, you're interested in this thing, let's talk about this thing. But it's like keeping track of like where they are, and then talking to them where they are, but being a person about it, because
Mhm.
you want to be authentic.
Yeah. Well, and I think not only being a person, but just like making sure from like, I guess, a user experience standpoint, like that it is really readable. And part of that is that humanity aspect.
Yeah.
Part of that is making sure that it's conversational and easy to read. You know, it's not some like college level thing, like you don't want that. Nobody wants that. It doesn't matter what their profession is. Doesn't matter how smart somebody is. They're not looking for that. So like that is part of it. But the other part of it is literally like structurally, like making sure that you've got a lot of subheadings that make it easy for people to
Yeah.
follow, making sure there's enough white space around that they can see those different sections. So part of that again is just like the visual aspect, which you might not think of initially when you're thinking about writing content. But the way that you structure a piece can massively impact how much people read it, how long they stay on the page, whether they keep reading or not. You want to make it easy for them to kind of skip to the parts that they're looking for.
Yeah.
if that's the case. And then also just so that they can like keep track. You don't want like giant long
Yeah.
graphs. You don't
Yeah.
want, yeah, I mean, lists, bullet points, everything like that, you know, just like you were mentioning, keeping it human and building that kind of flow, I guess.
Yeah, for sure. Well, like people don't want to read a huge chunk of just text. Our
Yeah.
brains are just like, no, I don't want to do that, especially with the way that things are structured on the internet where it's like 3 or 4 page or 3 or 4 lines and then there's a line and then there's like a break. So you want to keep that white space because it keeps the eye moving downward. But then like
Mhm.
with testimonials, you want to make sure those are indented and italicized because that's what we're used to seeing. And
Mhm.
it's also like, ooh, this is different. So it like
Right,
brings the eye to that thing.
right.
It's like, ooh, I want to see like what it's
Yeah,
supposed to say. Is this a story? Like
right.
it's just interesting. So making sure that you're formatting it in a way that like keeps their attention is really
Mhm.
important too.
Right. It lets you prioritize content in different ways.
Yes.
And if you can differentiate anything like testimonials or quotes or, you know, you have a fun little like pop-up or something that's going to get them to, you know, maybe you've got copy in something that's going to have them take an action somewhere in the middle, but it's
Mm-hmm.
broken up because it fits within this section.
Yes.
Um, you know, I just think
Yeah.
there are a lot of different ways to approach it. I mean, talk to any copy or content writer and they're going to have opinions on how
Yes.
things should be structured or on the best way to reach people or to get them to take action or just to keep them interested.
For
Um,
sure.
and I mean, I think that's why there is so much crossover between copy and content, but I don't know, just keep those things in mind. And I think that as much as I've, you know, especially me, but I think as much as we maybe have made it a little bit overwhelming, like it is a big topic.
It
It
is.
is a lot. It is probably best if you hire people who know what they're doing. If you want to have the best results, but that doesn't mean you have to. And also if you're just like, you know, you're a bit of a copy nerd or something, you like really like marketing, this is a really fun area to dive into because, um, I feel like most of marketing is held within the copy and content. Like, you know, you have somebody who's maybe strategizing. You obviously have people who are doing design and visuals. There's elements of your brand, but so much of that has to do with the writing because it's how you're actually reaching people. It's part of their first impression of you.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and it's part of how you take them through the whole buyer journey. So, as
Yeah.
much as it isn't all of marketing, it's in every part of marketing. And so that's why it is a great place to invest if you're going to, or to, like I said, do a deep dive and, you know, get nerdy about it and learn as much as you can. There are a lot of books, a lot of great resources. There's even a lot of free stuff online. But as you can tell, they are pretty big topics. I mean, we've already talked quite a bit about these and barely skimmed the surface. So,
Oh, for sure. Yeah. Well, and you always want to remember with the content and copy too, like the reason it is such a huge part of marketing is because it's about the connection and
mhm,
it grows the know, like, and trust between you and your renter. So,
right.
and it is going to be like the first thing that they see probably.
Mhm.
It's going to have some kind of content or copy. And it's like, if they connect with that, then they're going to keep moving through the process.
Mhm.
So that's why it's really important.
Right. Well, and like we're such interesting creatures as humans, you know, a lot of the way we move through the world is about connection. That's kind of like
Mm-hmm.
how we're hardwired. That's why, you know, stories are so effective, things like that, because it's how we communicate with each other. But I mean, something like, I don't know, what's it like 97% of communication is like body language and tone. And it's like, it's crazy how much of it is that. And when you're doing something like this, you don't really get either. So unless you're able
Right.
to really convey your tone in your writing, you're
Yep.
missing out on that chunk and you've already missed out on all the body language. So writing is such a tricky space, I think, sometimes
Right.
to convey meaning and to communicate effectively. So that's why so many people write about writing
Yeah.
because it's constantly a puzzle. Some things will work in one instance and not in another. So even though there are definitely like formulas and formats that you can use to write copy or to write content and to make it better to reach people, you know, there's a lot of it that really depends on the people you're trying to reach, which is why, you know, we jumped in with how important it is to focus on your renters and your target audience. But, um, you know, it's definitely a fun subject to learn about. And honestly, we hope you've kind of enjoyed this like little our little mini series, our like trio of videos about content and copy. We hope that it was informative and that it's helped some of you. You know, if it has, please leave us some comments, ask some questions. We'd love to hear from you. We'd love to know if there are other things you'd love to know about marketing and apartment marketing. You know, that's why we're here. We have a whole team, you know, of amazingly talented people who we'd love to like pick their brains about for anything that you need to know. So make sure that you leave comments, go ahead and like and subscribe if you're interested in more videos about copy and content or about apartment marketing in general. And yeah, I mean, thanks for watching, and I guess we'll see you next time.